Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Travis Fortney. I'm an adult services librarian at the Willoughby Public Library in downtown Willoughby, Ohio. Um, and tonight we're going to be joined by Amish inspirational author Shelley Shepard Gray. Reminder to everyone, you can keep up with future Between the Lines events by checking the library's Facebook page or on the library events calendar at we247.org. Tonight, I'm extremely excited to welcome Shelley Shepard Gray to Between the Lines. Shelley writes Amish and inspirational fiction and is the author of more than 100 books, including New York Times and USA Today bestsellers. This year, she's launching the Berlin Bookmobile series with A Perfect Amish Romance. Shelley lived in Southern Ohio for years before moving to Colorado Springs, where she's joining us from tonight. Shelley's married, the mother of 2 young adults, and always has a dachshund by her side. I've been working as a librarian in Ohio for the better part of a decade now, so I know that Shelley has lots of passionate fans in the community. I've got a few questions for Shelley written down tonight, but my hope is that those of you watching will take over the discussion and ask lots of questions. To ask Shelley something, just type a question into chat on Zoom or as a comment on Facebook, and I'll ask a question. To start, I think Shelley is going to read something from the new book for us.
Yeah, I sure am. Thank you all for joining me. This is so fun. I was talking with Travis that I'm so delighted. One of the reasons I moved to Colorado was to be near my adult children. And I'm so thankful I did for that personally. I'm a brand new grandmother. My daughter just had a baby 2 weeks ago. So if I had still been in Ohio, I wouldn't be able to see her. So I'm grateful for that. But the drawback of being out here is that I can't go to the Ohio libraries, and I used to visit, I'd say at least eight a year. And so this Zooming has taken a little bit of getting used to, but it's been a remarkable blessing for me. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my brand new series, the Berlin Bookmobile, and kind of how it came apart. And then I'm going to read to you a little bit from A Perfect Amish Romance. Now, I guess I should tell you before I forget, I grew up in Houston, and so unfortunately, when I start reading aloud, my Amish people sometimes start having a Texas accent, and I'm going to apologize to that in case I forget. But back to the inspiration for this series. I happened to be up at I think I was speaking, or one of the speakers over in Medina in Ohio years ago, maybe almost 10 years ago. And they always have big tables, as y'all know, and I was sitting with some librarians, and we started talking, and it turned out that they were bookmobile librarians. Well, I'm a writer, obviously, and I spend a lot of time at home, so I'm always interested in everyone's jobs. I'm always sure they're more interesting than mine. So I just peppered these poor ladies with dozens of questions. And they told me about driving around Amish country and delivering books to their patrons who were almost all Amish, and just helping them get the resources that they needed. And I kind of put that story, those stories away in my back pocket. I just thought this would be really something fun, is to combine my love of Amish and librarians and put it all together. So that's how the inspiration of this series came to be. What's kind of, I really have a librarian. She's kind of a newbie librarian, and she decides she's going to play matchmaker for all these Amish. And the series was a lot of fun to write. I have to tell you that. The inspiration for this book, especially the title here, A Perfect Amish Romance, is goes back to, boy, when my daughter was in high school, or years ago, I used to teach sixth grade. So I was around a lot of 12 and 13-year-olds. And I remember having multiple conversations with kids and my daughter about reading books, and just how, especially books with happy endings like romances. And it's just nothing in life can ever be like that. And why can't everybody have a perfect romance like in the books? Maybe there's a lot of reasons for that, but I kind of am just a fan of that. Maybe we all, like the characters in my book, to start discovering really what love is all about, and maybe it is not about perfection but imperfection, and admiring yourself and the people around you, and the people are important to you for their everything about them, flaws and all. And so that's kind of how this book came about. I have a gal named Kayla, and she's kind of given up on love because of a past hurtful relationship, but she still secretly just checks out these books at the bookmobile with happy ending. I also happen to have another relationship in this book, and it's with the hero's little sister named Tiny. Some of you may know that a lot of Amish have nicknames, because a lot of their first names might be Bible names. And so there might be a whole lot of Pauls or Johns or Marys. And so it's not uncommon for someone in the Amish community to have kind of an interesting nickname. So I came up with Tiny, and that as her nickname, and I've always just kind of liked it. Anyway, the section I'm going to read from you, I just decided just to go way over here on chapter 16. And it is not with my heroine Kayla, but with Tiny. I thought I picked this chapter, y'all, because I thought it might make you smile. I am one of those people that I write a book, and I'll leave big gaps for things that I need to research. I like to get my 10 pages done a day and just stay on deadline. And I find if I get bogged down in research, the book, I won't get as far as I would like to. So I had some reason in my head that this chapter needed to be about making apple butter. And I have to tell you, I spent a whole lot of time researching apple butter. And when I ended up talking to my Amish friend, I was telling her about this. And of course, I was talking to her on the phone, but I could almost feel her rolling her eyes like, Shelley, you always make everything so difficult. But anyway, so this is the chapter. I'm not going to read a whole chapter, but maybe about 5 pages or so. I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll talk about it on the other side. So this is chapter 16. The following day was Tiny's least favorite day of the year, Apple Butter Day. Looking at the wooden bushel of Macintosh apples, she grimaced. Peeling all those apples was going to take hours. Dicing them, pulverizing them into a fine paste, took even longer. All that was before she even started cooking. Jack, that's her brother, who'd been walking by the kitchen before heading back to the barn, paused when he saw her mournful expression. Uh-oh, let me guess. Apple butter day? Yeah. She breathed out a sigh. I can find joy in making almost anything except apple butter. I hate it so much. Jack eyed the overflowing basket filled with approximately 100 red delicious apples. Maybe you should make a smaller amount. Do you have to make so much of it at once? I do. Otherwise, I'm going to have to spend one more day on it, and I cannot do more than necessary. Their mother entered the kitchen with a set of towels in her arms. Her impatient glare made it obvious that she'd heard Tiny's complaints. Tiny, you make too much out of this chore. Now stop complaining and get to work. I will. Sorry, ma'am. She picked up her paring knife. You know how popular your apple butter is, child. Everyone appreciates your hard work. I know. I'll get busy right now, Tiny said as she quickly peeled one apple and placed it in a large metal bowl. Good, Mom said as she and Becca headed down the basement to do laundry. The moment Mom was out of sight, Tiny put the knife down again. Jack gave her a sympathetic smile. Sorry about your long day. Donka, but Mom's right. I shouldn't complain. We get more orders for apple butter than any of our other jams, and taking it only makes one day. One very long day, he quipped as he entered the mudroom, put on his boots, heavy coat, and went out to work in the barn. When Tiny heard the door open and shut, she knew she couldn't dally any longer. She slipped on her apron, sat down on an ancient wooden stool, and picked up that paring knife once again. It was time. Picking up the prettiest red apple, she got to work. Within a few minutes, her hands worked efficiently as her mind drifted to how her mother had painstakingly taught her to do each step when Tiny was only 6 or 7. For years. For years, Tiny would work by her side, trying her best to emulate her mother's neat, efficient way of peeling and quartering the fruit. As she continued, she tried to think of the positives instead of how many awful apple butter memories she had. She wasn't sure how it had happened, but every accident she'd had in the kitchen took place when she'd made this. One time she burned herself bad enough to have a bandage on her hand. Another time she sliced off part of her thumb with a dull paring knife. Then there was the day she'd lost track of time, had the stove on too high, and burned the whole batch and ruined the pot to boot. Her mother had been so put out, she made Tiny use her own money to buy a new stew pot. Remembering the moment when she'd had to give most of her savings to the shop clerk at the store, it still made her wince. However, her mother was not wrong. Even though she'd had many, many bad apple experiences, it was worth it. That counted for a lot. Yes, she needed to think more positively. Honestly, it was better to be busy than not, especially since she still was mourning the end of her relationship with Joel. After pausing to make sure no one was around to hear, she talked to God, as was her way. Now, she knew most people preferred quiet, respectful prayers, not her. She liked to believe the Lord was standing right beside her in whatever room she was in, carefully listening to everything she had to say. God, I cannot believe my Joel could be so sneaky. Why did he decide to start spending so much time with Jane Schultz? And yeah, I know I shouldn't be so petty and mean. I realize she's lost a husband, and I'm sure that was mighty hard. I'm sure she's been through more than I can imagine. And yes, I promise I'll pray for her, and I'll pray for me to be a better person. But I'm sorry, God. I'm still not happy about Joel spending so much time with her. Of course, she only heard silence, but Tiny sorta felt his displeasure. She didn't blame him. She sounded selfish and spiteful. Of course, God wanted her to be a better person, but she wasn't perfect. She was only herself. And if she didn't nurse her disappointment, she feared she was going to dissolve into tears again, and that would be so awful. Sighing, she continued to peel as she attempted to think more positive thoughts. Tried to think about how happy she'd be tomorrow when she put up dozens of chives in the cold cellar after the long day of doing her least favorite thing. She picked up another apple, peeled away, trying to imagine happy, content, not be angry at Joel. She started thinking about all the other men she knew and attempted to picture herself by one of their sides. Why, more than 2 eligible men had sought her out. Some weren't even that bad. No, that wasn't true. Most weren't bad at all, except for Caleb. Just remember the rude way Caleb had courted her during last year's Christmas gathering made her shiver, which caused her to take a good slice on her left palm. Why did her mother insist on having such sharp knives? Running to the sink, she stuck her hand under the cold water and tried not to yell, whine, cry, or make things worse. All she seemed to be able to do was bite her bottom lip hard enough, and it started bleeding too. Right in the middle of her small crisis, she was vaguely aware of a knock at the front door and her mother speaking to whoever was there. She heard footsteps. Tiny, why are you standing there with your hand under your faucet? Her mother asked. Oh my word, you did it again. Don't worry, I'll take care of the blood in a minute. It's only on the countertop. The apples are clean. You better double check. I will, I promise, she called out as she tried to will her hand to stop bleeding. Oh, Tiny, a deeper voice murmured. She knew that voice. Turned around, she gaped. Joel, Joel, what are you doing here? Helping you patch up your cut, it seems, he said as he walked to her side and turned off the faucet. Now, let me see, he murmured as he took hold of her hand. She was too stunned to see Joel pull her hand away. Feeling out of sorts, she kind of glanced up at her mother hovering in the doorway. For the first time Tiny could ever recall, her mother was not spouting off her opinion or cautioning her to be more careful. Instead, she was simply watching the two of them. He turned to look over his shoulder. Violet, where are the Band-Aids? In the drawer next to the pantry. I'll get them. Nah, that's all right. I can do it. That's mighty nice of you, said her mother. Are you sure? Yeah, Tiny and I need to have a little talk anyway. If she don't mind, I'm going to stay here and help her with this apple butter. Tiny, her mother prompted, is that what you want? Not really. She was still upset with him and confused by his hot and cold actions. But on the other hand, she'd known Joel too long to refuse to hear what he had to say. Joel, staying here is fine. It's all right. I guess we need to talk. And yes, she sounded as if she had just announced she was getting ready to go clean toilets. After giving them another searching look, Mother disappeared. What do you want to talk to me about? She asked. Unfortunately, she didn't sound as tough as she'd hoped. That probably has something to do with the fact that her hand was now bleeding well and good all over the bottom of that sink. Just seeing the red stain made her sway in her feet. Us, Jane, Joel said as he easily helped her sit on top of the kitchen counter. Usually she would have protested this, but she was rather happy to be off her feet. Instead, she focused on their conversation. I do not want to talk to you about Jane Schultz. He frowned. I don't think we're going to be able to talk about anything till you get your bearings. Close your eyes if you have to, but don't you get woozy on me. Oh, but that was typical Joel. He liked to be in control of every situation, even when he wasn't. And that's where I'll stop. So that's just a little section about this book and making apple butter and peeling. I'm left-handed and I can't peel an apple to save my soul. My daughter worked at an apple farm when she was in high school, and she's one of those people that can peel an apple in one small just long stretch. I've always been envious of that. So it wasn't hard for me to imagine Tiny nicking her finger while peeling apples. I've done that a time or two.
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, thanks for reading that section. I forgot to mention to everyone that you can buy the book at Max Backs. I put a link in the chat on Zoom, so go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, I signed a bunch of booklet plates for them and sent them.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I must have signed 25 or so. So it's kind of fun that they are going to have signed copies of A Perfect Amish Romance available.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So first question.
Okay.
I guess you kind of answered this at the beginning, but what made you decide to create a series around a bookmobile driver and also I was interested when you were talking about the bookmobile drivers serving the Amish community. How do they reconcile? Because I thought I grew up, here in Ohio, but I would visit Holmes County all the time, and my grandpa lived in Orville and hired Amish people, to work on his farm all the time, building things and whatnot. And I thought and so that's the only thing I personally know about Amish people is from that. but I thought they didn't like books, or they, you know,
Oh,
there's a, you know, they're not allowed to read adult books, I thought. But so I'm just curious how the librarians in Medina reconcile that with, uh,
oh, well, you know what? You must be in Orville. That is church community is frowns upon that. What you learn when you visit enough Amish communities like I have is that everyone's different. And they have different roles that the bishops and the deacons and the preachers help devise and implement, put in. And the most of the Amish ladies I know, they not only read books, they read almost as much as I do, which says a lot because I read a lot.
yeah,
Kind of a funny story. So my Amish friend, I guess my best friend that's Amish. Her name is Claire. She lives up in Sugar Creek, and we were introduced from a friends of a friend. And the first time I met Clara, I was with someone who was driving. We pulled up to her house, and Clara got in the car with us, and we went to a quilt show. I want to say we exchanged some letters after that. Maybe the second time I met Claire at a restaurant. The third time she trusted me enough and we had enough of a rapport that Claire invited me to get to see a tour of her house. Because, it's no secret. The reason I was so interested in meeting her was because I'm writing about the Amish. And this was years ago. This was back when I think I'd only finished 2 Amish books. So anyway, we went on a tour of her house, which was wonderful. And I tried not to ask too many pesky questions so I wouldn't annoy her. I was very worried about annoying her. But anyway, at the very end, she said, Shelley, would you like to see my favorite part of the house, my favorite thing in the living room? And I said, absolutely, I cannot wait to see this. And honestly, y'all, I was thinking, oh, she's going to show me her Bible. It's going to be something, maybe a quilt. And it was a bookshelf. Now, behind me, I have all my books, but probably about, I don't know, maybe the size of one of these. It was filled with books. And she said, I'm a reader, and they were almost all Christian romances, and probably half were Amish Christian romances.
hmm.
I really love to read. And then she picked up a library book, and it was a Karen Kingsbury book. And I forget the title of it now, but she said, I just finished this. Well, I mean, I read everybody, but I just had happened to have read that same book. And I said, oh my gosh, I love that. And what did you think of? And next thing you know, we were sitting on the couch, and this is absolutely true, talking about this book. And that changed our whole relationship. It was no longer Clara, the Amish lady who, is trying to like help out Shelley, the writer. It and me trying to, ask her questions without being annoying. All of a sudden, we had something in common, and it was books that we liked, authors we enjoyed, and we still to this day. We will end letters with, this is some books I've been reading lately and who I liked. So I guess for the Amish I've met, Travis, they all read books, thank goodness.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Yeah, I had no idea because I was also wondering if I mean, so is this Amish friend? Is she a reader of your like? Do you use her as a first reader or a fact checker or that?
I don't use it as her as a first reader, although she's so kind to me. I don't think she would mind. But honestly, I am one of those writers that meets a deadline, but I don't finish it way before the deadline. So if
Oh,
the book is due, say, I don't know, February 15th, I'll have finished it like ready to go to be sent to my editor on February 15th. So I never get it done quick enough for her to mail it and have time to read it. But I do send her every one of my books. And she's real honest. I mean, sometimes she'll say, I really like this. And sometimes she'll just be very polite. Yes, I read it. and that's okay with me. I'm the same way with authors that I write. I seem to really favor some books more than others of an author, and I have a feeling she's like that with me. Her favorite book of mine is called Grace. It's a Christmas book I wrote years ago, and it's somewhere back here. But anyway, so like I love writing Christmas books. So I had just sent her a latest one I had written, and she said, I liked it, still not as much as Grace. So that's been fun to hear. One day I'm going to have a book and she's going to be like, all right, you did it again. It was, this one was a new favorite. So we'll see.
Yeah, Amish and inspirational Christmas books are. I don't know if you visited many libraries in person, but they're at libraries. It's a whole thing. I mean, at Mentor Library where I used to work, we were ordering the kind of Christmas section. I don't know, for half the year it seems like, and it's about as big as half of the half of the fiction section. And the great thing about it is those, I mean, from a writer's perspective especially, those books don't get weeded out of the collection because it's part of the Christmas collection, so that they linger on forever. And it's something that libraries always buy every year, more and more Christmas books. So I imagine it's and the public loves Christmas books. That's why we buy them. So it's a good and profitable thing to write, I'm sure.
I like to read them, and I'm funny. I'll start reading Christmas books or ordering them or so. But for you about October, that's kind of my like. All right, I'm getting ready to be in the Christmas spirit. So. But Grace was my first Christmas book, and I remember I was under contract to write 3 books that year, and I got a phone call from my editor, and she said, Shelley, we had an idea. We'd like you to write a Christmas book, and I was delighted. I mean, I'd been wanting to write one, and just because I love reading them so much. And she said, but here's the kicker. It was going to be a novella, and she said, we need it soon so it can go to get published. So can you write it? I think it was like in 6 weeks. And I pretty much said, I will do anything to get to do this. So as soon as I hung up the phone, I was telling my husband, I'm like, well, I'm going to get to write this Christmas book, and I need to think of one and give them a synopsis. And then he just kind of, after all the excitement went down, he's like, so I'm probably not going to be seeing you except in your office for the next 6 weeks. I'm like, yep, probably. But it was great. It was great.
Yeah, so was that pretty early on in your career?
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think that was the year I had let's see, it was some Sugar Creek books. I think it was Winter's Awakening and Spring's Renewal. That was the year that we had Grace come out. For a long time, I would have 3 books in a series, and then the Christmas book would be one that would go back to the series before. Somehow somebody thought that was a good idea. But I heard from a lot of very confused readers. They'd be like, well, so we picked up the Christmas book. It has nothing to do with the 3 books we've read this year. What's going on? And then I would have to give them this whole explanation. So anyway, like this with this series is fun. We have, of course, here it is. This one came out in January, A Perfect Amish Romance. And then there's going to be one out, I think it's in May, and it's an Amish surprise. And then we have a Christmas book coming out in November, and it's called A Christmas Courtship. And I wish I had a mock-up of the Christmas cover. The gal's in a red dress. She's holding a sled. It's gorgeous, and I'm very excited about it. It was super fun to write. So.
Do you think that writing that first Christmas novella in 6 weeks, writing it so fast, do you think that that helped you, become so prolific? I mean, I want to get to the bottom of this 100 books in 20 years. That's impressive.
I'm blessed because I can write pretty fast, and I know I have a lot of writing buddies, and they have all kinds of tricks. I mean, they have timers on their desks, and I don't know, soothing music or whatever, everything to inspire them just to sit down and concentrate. But I really enjoy writing, and it's always come fairly easy to me, at least that first draft. So yes, a deadlines definitely helps. And also, I usually write more than one book at the same time. So that kind of helps for me too sometimes. So if I get bored with one book, I'll switch over for maybe Thursday and Friday and work on a different book. And then maybe on Saturday, I'll go back and read something else or write something else. Especially if I'm on a nice steady deadline, I'll probably write 6 days a week, but not all day. So, but maybe 4 hours a day, 4 or 5.
Yeah. Did you write like that when your kids were young, and when you were, I know you started out working as a teacher. I'm just curious.
Right. I didn't sell. I don't think I sold my first book till I was almost 30. So when my kids were real young, I was teaching school. I used to teach 4th and 5th grade, and then 6th grade for years. I think I taught for 11 years. And and really, I don't know if this makes it good or not, but how I ended up starting to write, I tell this story a lot, but those 6th graders were wearing me out, and they were really loud. And I mean, I loved them. I loved teaching. I loved the whole sense of community, but it was a lot after 12 years. And so maybe the last couple of years I was teaching, instead of going to the teacher's lounge for lunch, I would sit in my classroom where it was peaceful and quiet, and I would read. And other, everyone would be like, they would think I was working so hard. Oh, there's Shelley grading papers, and I wasn't grading papers. I was reading whatever book I had. And one day I didn't have a book, and I just thought, now what? Do I want to do lesson plans? Do I want to grade papers? Do I want to go do something? And I had been kind of playing around with the idea, but I was always afraid. But I went ahead and started my computer and got to a blank page and wrote chapter 1 and started making up a book. And that's how I began writing. And I have to tell you, because I have fond memories of teaching, but I also have memories of just how hard I worked. I don't think of writing romance novels as near as hard a work as educators have. That's something to be proud of, is educating children. I'm just grateful. I get to spend my days in my office making things up. It's an easier job for sure.
Yeah, I worked for a little while as a children's librarian, and like that 6th grade age, that middle school age, that's it's a rough age to wrangle every day, I guess.
They were great. It was just, they were a lot. But yeah, to answer your original questions, by the time I really got started writing in earnest, both my kids were in school all day, and so I would write while they were at school, and then I remember sometimes around 1:30 or so, I would realize that I hadn't had a shower, I hadn't made any beds, I hadn't thought about anything for dinner, and I would just be like, uh-oh. And so I'd run around the whole house and get everything all cleaned up and try and thaw something up for dinner, and then be ready to go when the kids got home from school or when I had to go pick them up. And so for a long time, they really had no idea just how much I wrote. They just knew I was mom, and there she is again, ready to do whatever we need to do, which I think is how it's supposed to be.
So a few questions from readers have started to come in, so I'll ask one of those right now. But
Okay.
why do you think Amish fiction is so popular?
You know, I think it's for a lot of reasons. Readers have told me why they think it's popular. I think people long to have a simpler life. I don't know, maybe all what's been going on over the last year has given all of us a new appreciation for things that are simpler. So I know when I write about the Amish and they're in their kitchen and they're just concentrating on the moment now, I appreciate that. Sometimes, you know, even when I'm with a bunch of people my age or wherever, and everyone's got their phone in their hand, it's people aren't trying to be rude, but texts are going and so forth. I think sometimes people long for moments when everyone isn't so frantically trying to connect with several people all at the same time. Something else that I know people enjoy is just that the faith is such an integral part of being Amish, and it's not kind of added on. It's of who they are, and I think some people enjoy that too. I know as I write, I seem to be more thinking about things and faithful in my faith and the characters' journeys, and I'm always learning something. So I enjoy that aspect. Also, I think there's a lot of people that like reading Amish fiction, just like they might enjoy reading any other kind of fiction, like a historical fiction, because there's a lot to learn. If you live out in Colorado, say, or somewhere else where maybe you don't see a lot of Amish, you may have a lot of questions. So it's an opportunity to learn about a whole new culture. I know I have certainly learned a lot, and you know, just a lot about a lot of different little things. So it's been, I've enjoyed that aspect of it also.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I notice I notice especially in the last year that I've been reading a lot of books with like a or like an outdoorsy survivalist theme. I mean, I read it's like exclusively fiction, but I seek those out for some reason. So maybe that is part of it, that the lifestyle appeals to people, and they're kind of reading it partly as a like entertainment with a little how-to angle thrown in there, I guess.
I I agree. I know one time I was wandering around Claire's backyard, asking her to show me her garden. And I'm just a terrible gardener. So I'm always asking questions because I have no clue. And anyway, I'm tromping around, and all of a sudden I saw she had two chairs and a fire pit. And I'm like, Claire, what are you doing? Because sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't seem very Amish. And she's like, oh well, we've been barbecuing outside and enjoying the evenings in the summer. And I said, oh. And she said, oh yeah, she goes, Shelley, the beautiful nights in the summer, that's when you should be outside and enjoying nature. And then she started showing me this nest from the Orioles or something, and of the birds. And she said, you need to enjoy the moment you're in. Yeah. And I was like, yes, I do. I felt like I should be taking notes, note to Shelley, stop always worrying about the future, enjoy this moment right now and appreciate it. So I sometimes I'll find myself writing, and I'll try to incorporate a little bit of these words of wisdom. So just they meant something to me. So sometimes I'm hoping they'll mean something to the readers too.
Yeah, that's a great story. So Marge is writing in from Connecticut. She says that's a great thing about these Zoom talks too, is that people from Connecticut can watch, and you can join us from Colorado City. But
Right.
greetings from Connecticut. 18 inches of snow on Monday. Do you connect with other Amish fiction writers?
I do. It's fun. Years ago, I think it was in 2011 maybe, or 2009. I was writing for Avon Books, and Avon is part of HarperCollins, which is anyway was Zondervan and Thomas Nelson are also part of that. Anyway, I got an email from a publicist saying, Shelley, we're thinking about putting you on a tour. It called it an Amish Country Christmas Tour. And we're going to put you with Amy Clipston and Vanetta Chapman. Would you be willing to go? And I mean, that's the kind of stuff, y'all, that dreams are made out of. I mean, author dreams, getting to go on a book tour. Yes, I couldn't say yes fast enough. And next thing I know, I was on several months later a book tour with two publicists, Vanetta and Amy, in a van. And we started out I'm trying to make sure I get this right. We started out in Shipshewana. I guess I flew into Chicago. We all got in together. We drove down to Shipshe, and we were in a Christmas parade together. And then we drove, we did several events. Then we drove over to Holmes County, and we were in Sugar Creek and other things. And then we went all the way up. That's where all my books were set. And then we went up to Lancaster County, where Amy's books were set. And so I really bonded with Amy Clipston and Vanetta Chapman, and they're still two of my dear friends. I mean, I do some anthologies now with Amy, but really, if we don't hear from each other, we'll email each other just to see how we're doing, or we'll Zoom together. Once we started with that group, then I would go to conferences, and we would introduce each other to more people. For example, Suzanne Woods Fisher. And so now we've got a whole crew of us. Last year for 220, I was going to do another girlfriend getaway. I've hosted 3 of them, and the first one I did by myself, which was fine, but I kind of started thinking I need more authors. And so the second one, Vanetta and I hosted it together, and we had a couple of guest authors, like Kathleen Fuller was there. So was Amanda Flower. And then the third year with Amy, I think we had 10 guest authors, including Suzanne Fisher. And then this year that we ended up having to cancel, Amy and Suzanne and I were going to be co-hosting it, or all 3 of us. So yeah, we have a lot in common. That's the long answer to a short question. And I'm glad to have other author buddies that write the same thing I do.
So I have a question. You say in your bio that like your bio on your webpage, I was reading it, and you say that you've always thought of yourself as a hard worker, but not great at anything. And I know a lot of your fans would disagree about that, but I was thinking, your online bio is very humble, very down to earth. You seem like a very humble and down to earth person. And do you think staying humble is a key to your success? Just
I
maybe
think
I don't want to
this,
dig too deep, but
no, I mean, I think it's just the way I made it up. I mean, and I've always been this, and I'm not trying to pretend to be humble or whatever. I mean, I'm always sure that I'm not going to get another contract. I'm always
yeah,
sure that, um, so, and I can look at my work honestly. I mean, because I read so much, I can read some authors' books, and I just know that they just have a far different voice than I do. They maybe, for lack of a better word, they're just a lot more literate, and I usually write fairly simply. I don't like a lot of description and things. If I'm just going to say someone's going to go through the door, they're just going to go through the door, and I'm not going to have a bunch of description about that. So I don't know. I think if someone has said, well, what's the key to getting 100 books published? And I guess my answer would be is one, just believe that you can do it. And two, to actually write. I mean, I know a lot of people that say, oh, I'm going to be a writer, or I would be a writer if I had more time, or I have so many other things to do besides write a book, even though that's their job. I've always just like, well, if I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to take it seriously, and I'm going to write the book. I'm going to write it and turn it in when I promised the editor I would. I So I don't know. I think that's the key to my success is I stopped listening to everyone who said, you're just a sixth grade teacher. You didn't go to school to learn how to write books. I just thought, I'm gonna write, and if people like this story, someone else likes it besides me, I'm gonna be grateful. So
yeah, great answer. Yeah, I think bring it back to the Amish. I think that's what my grandpa liked about the Amish. All those maybe that's part of why they have appealed to you so much too. It's because I think what he liked about him is the very serious, nose to the grindstone, not a lot of talk, just kind of getting the work done. He would just talk and talk about how much he loved this one Amish guy in particular. So but it's been years and I can't remember his name. So let's see another a couple more questions about writing. For the or about the Amish in particular. Um,
okay.
let's see what are some misconceptions that Englishers have about the Amish, and what things would the Amish like us to understand about them?
Let's see here. I think there's. It just depends who you talk to about the misconceptions about the Amish. I've heard everything, honestly, from they don't have a sense of humor, to they would have no idea what a computer is. The Amish are very aware of, first of all, they have a great sense of humor. Some do, some don't, just like any other person. And they, they're very aware of what's going on in the world. They just choose not to have it a part of their every life. I can't speak for the whole Amish community, but I do know some of the ladies I've become friends with. Um, I think something that they would appreciate someone who isn't familiar with their culture to understand is that they're very accepting of people who are not Amish. And perhaps that's something all of us can strive to be more like, is to be accepting of people who are not exactly like us. I Back to those first meetings with Clara. Um, as I told y'all, I'm from Texas, and in the winter, you'll almost always see me in a sweater, jeans, and cowboy boots. That's just what I wear every day. And I also, I have like acrylic nails and makeup or whatever. Anyway, when I was getting ready for that first visit with Clara, they were going to pick me up. The ladies were, and they were going to take me up to Sugar Creek. And I knew I was going to get to meet a real Amish lady. And I was scared to death that she'd find out I was writing Amish romances. And here I am in a sweater and jeans. And I was standing in my closet the night before, and my husband's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, I don't know what to wear. Maybe I should try and dress Amish." And he started laughing, and he's like, "You can't be anything but yourself, Shelley. You're never gonna, you could put on a long dress and put your hair up. You're not gonna be Amish." And I was like, good point. And I think that sometimes people think, oh, well, if I'm around the Amish, they're going to be offended if I say, well, I don't go to church, or I go to Catholic church, or whatever. But the Amish are just the opposite. They're just like, what do we have in common, instead of how are we different? And it's fun. It's fun to introduce someone to some of my Amish friends, and they'll be very nervous about, like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to complain about my husband who, burned the dinner last night. And next thing you know, we're all talking about stories, and one of them will be saying something like, "Oh, my husband, he." One thing they said once, which I thought was hysterical, is the lady said, "He says I can't drive the horse." And I'm like, "What?" And she meant like on the buggy, like couldn't control the horse well. And I was like, "My husband does that when I'm driving on the freeway. He says I'm not doing it right, So I think we all have something in common. That's a very common misconception.
Another question from a reader. You mentioned that you visited Amish country in Holmes County, or I think you said that's where most of the kind of your main inspiration when you were in Ohio. What are your favorite activities or restaurants in the country? And I mean,
this is a great question. Yeah, no. My favorite place to go up in Holmes County, at least, is the Walnut Creek Tea Shop. And it's just it's a store, but it goes on forever. It's been added on, and you can get anything there. You can get fresh ice cream. They can make you a sandwich. You can, they have candles, they have cookware. You can get Amish books. Somewhere in my office here, I have a little Amish English dictionary I've gotten there. So that's one of my favorite places to go up in Holmes County. Another famous favorite place for sentimental reasons is, I think it's in Walnut Creek or else in Berlin, and it is called Yoder's Amish Farm, and it's kind of a tourist place. You go there to get to see a real live Amish house and barn. But the reason it's so close to my heart is on one of my girlfriend getaways, I was taking a group of readers there, and to be real honest, we were kind of doing the tour around, and everyone was showing them an Amish house. Well, I've been into a lot of Amish houses before, so I was just kind of sidling off to myself, and I just thought, oh, I'm just going to go over in the barn and wait for everybody. And because it was May and they had baby animals, so I was talking to the Amish farmer, and we're looking at the pigs and so forth, and he said, all of a sudden I saw this dachshund running around, and the dachshund, I could tell, just had puppies. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, where are her puppies? And he goes, oh, they're not dachshund puppies. They're half beagle, half dachshund, and they're in one of the stalls. You can go over if you like. So me, puppies, off I go. And then he kind of was chuckling at me, and he goes, Shelley, you can get in the stall if you want. So now I'm in the stall with like 7 puppies, and they were so cute. They're as cute as all get out. And I said, well, I guess they're all gone, right? Are they all spoken for? And he said, oh no, just 2. And then I just started thinking, well, how much are they? And I thought, I bet they're real expensive, right? And he goes, oh, I don't know, maybe 100. And so next thing I know, I pull out my phone and I'm calling my husband from the stall in the barn saying, I think we need to get a puppy, a half dachshund, half beagle puppy. And he said, no way, Shelley. You're supposed to be with your readers. Get off the phone and stop looking at puppies. I'm like, okay. So I clicked off and then I took a picture of the puppies down at my feet and I sent it to him just to show that I wasn't being just completely weird. Like they really were cute. Next thing I know, he calls me back and he goes, we can get the one that looks kind of like Eddie Munster, which is, I don't even know if anybody even knows what Eddie Munster is. It was an old movie, old TV show. Anyway, Eddie Munster had like this widow's peak. And I'm like, looking at all the puppies. They all look the same to me. And then readers are coming over after the home turn. They're like, Shelley, what are you doing in the stall with the dogs? And I'm like, my husband said I can get the one that looks like Eddie Munster. So we all started picking up puppies, taking selfies with the puppies, showing them to my husband. And we ended up, I got a puppy. And we named it. And so that's one of my favorite things about Holmes County is a wonderful memory is I got Eddie the puppy there from the meter event.
That's great. Yeah, my brother brought home a dog from Amish country once. Well, a little puppy that someone like my mom would always like you can go there and buy vegetables in bulk. She'd go there and buy a whole bunch of vegetables, and they were, when he was a little kid, he brought home a little puppy from Amish country, and the dog was named Omar. We had him for probably 15 years, so that's funny. Small world.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're the only two people who have done that, but
Yeah, I'm sure not.
It's fun, yeah.
Let's see. So, oh, here's another question from a reader. Another Amish or inspirational fiction author discussed the fact that her books have a little more PDA than most traditional Amish fiction. How do you gauge the intensity of romantic elements you include in your books? If you're, I know as working as a librarian, a lot of readers of inspirational, prefer clean or,
Right.
I'm sure you know too.
Well, what's interesting to me is I usually let the characters kind of, well, I guess we'll determine the amount of PDA. I've had some Amish books that I've written, and I don't even know if they've ever kissed by the end of it. Usually in an Amish fiction, you can at least have the kisses, at the end and inspirational. But and then others, a couple I've written, it was like they had known each other forever. They had already had a big. There's a lot of tension between them and the reader, and I knew, and my made-up people knew they were going to be together soon, and so that that meant there was going to be just a little bit more longing and feelings and hugs and kisses, I guess. And sometimes, I'll write something and then my editor will be like, yeah, we might need to tone this down a little bit. Nothing too crazy, y'all, I promise, but it's kind of funny. I mean, I guess they're just like, it's just writing these kind of books are like any books. It just depends on the people involved. Sometimes the situation calls for more romance, sometimes less.
Okay, just two more questions if that's all right.
Okay.
First one is what other Amish authors or books would or new books would you recommend? And what are you reading lately?
Oh, sure. To be real honest, I don't usually read other Amish authors' books unless I've been asked to endorse them. And the main reason is there's so many books on the market, and there I'm always afraid of my books not sounding like Shelley. I would hate to read someone and unknowingly somehow maybe develop their cadence to their words or something like that. But that said, I will tell you that one of my favorites is Suzanne Woods Fisher's books. She just has a way about her writing that I admire, and I find them easy to read. There's some Amish fiction writers that are very well known and respected, and I agree they write beautifully, but they sometimes are a little long-winded just for my reading pace. I read fast, and just like I write fast, so I like books that kind of click along. So I like Suzanne's books a lot. I would have to say that Vanetta Chapman, she can write a great plot, which I'm there's usually a plotter and a pantser. I am definitely a pantser as far as writing a book. I have a very general idea of what's going to happen, and then a lot of times I'm just kind of wandering around. I think this is what's going to need to happen next. Vanetta is just an expert at having a tight plot. Amy Clifton is too. I've watched Amy plot a book, and it's amazing. So those are some of my favorite Amish writers.
What are your non-Amish reading tastes?
I like reading just about anything. Really, I read inspirational fiction. I read secular fiction. Happen to be on a World War II kick right now. I can't read enough of those books that are coming out, and I'm enjoying those. I like a lot of historical fiction. I think I'm trying to think the name. There's something about something in Russia. I just read A Gentleman in Moscow, maybe it was called. Anyway, yeah. I wrote, I belong to Book of the Month Club. And so one of the reasons I joined that and I read a book from them is I kind of wanted to get myself out of a reading rut and discover some new authors and some new genres. So those are some of the things I like to read. I love to read suspenseful books just because I write a little bit of that, but not to the extent that some of these other authors do. So I kind of have books all over the house too. I have books on my Kindle that I read at night because I learned the hard way not to read World War II books at night because then I'll be dreaming bad dreams all night. So it's kind of fun. I really am. If you send me to the library or to the book section at Walmart, Target, to Barnes and Noble, I will have a stack of books. I am one of those readers that almost anything appeals to me.
Great. So last question, and I want to make sure there's a reader question about this too, so I want to make sure I get that in. But the reader question is, will this be a series? The new, which you've already, but you can, and how many books do you anticipate doing? And then my question is just what's on the horizon for you, writing wise?
Well, this year is going to be a busy year for me for publications. I think I have 5 novels and 3 novellas getting published in 2021. So I wrote a lot during the pandemic and 2019 too. But so yeah, to answer the reader's question, yeah, right now there's supposed to be 3 books in the Berlin Bookmobile series. I kind of pitched a 4th book because I thought it was the best title. It's a Wonderful Bookmobile. I thought it would be so great to have kind of a Valentine theme book. just based on the bookmobile. I don't know if it's going to get bought or not, but right now there's a trilogy, and they're all going to be published this year. As far as this series, I have a Harlequin coming out in July, and it's called Widow's Secret, and it's a cold case in Adams County. So it's set in Amish country, but the heroine is English. Let's see here. Oh, and I've got a book coming out from Blackstone, and it is set in Ross County, which right outside the prison. So it's more of a suspense, romance, contemporary. Again, there are some Amish characters, but the main characters are all English. So those are, I guess those are the 5 books, and then I have a couple of novellas coming out they're all Amish. So those are all what's coming out this year. Next year, it looks like I might have I'm really excited. I'm going to have a book set in Colorado, set in Woodland Park, and it's going to be firefighters that are all ex-military. So I live in Colorado Springs, right next to Fort Carson. So I right next to the Army base. We live in a colonel's old house, and we are surrounded by people living in the military. And so I've embraced learning a lot about all that. And then we're right by Woodland Park. So I think I'm going to have 2 books out about that next year, and then another Amish series too.
I was going to ask you if you stopped to reflect at all when you hit book 100, but it sounds like you're on the way to 200.
Maybe, I don't know. I keep thinking, well, maybe this year I'll slow down, but honestly, I love it. I love to write. I love to make up books, and I like Zooming and visiting with people. I like talking books with other people. So I'm not quite ready to give it up. So hopefully I'll get to be a writer a little bit longer.
Well, that's all I've got as far as questions. So thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, and I appreciate all the work y'all did to have me here. I know it's a lot to set these up, so I'm very grateful. And thank you to everyone who has joined me either on Facebook or here on Zoom. So wishing all of you a good evening and many blessings. Thank you.
Good one.